Alright, now let's start with Docker storage. Okay, so to manage data in Docker, by default, all the files created inside any container are stored on a writable container layer. So this means that the data doesn't persist when that container no longer existed. So the data will be removed completely if you killed and removed your container, and the container's writable layer is tightly coupled to host machine where container is running. Writing into containers writable layers requires a storage driver to manage the file system. Okay, so now there are type of the mounts actually you have. So this is the official documentation, again, the storage part. So this is the Docker host, as you can see, and we have the bind mount, we have the volume, and we have the temp fs mount. Okay, so we have three things actually. So for the volumes, they are stored in a part of the host file system, which is managed by the Docker, which is on var lib docker volumes on Linux, and non-Docker processes shouldn't modify this part of the file system. So as you can see, volumes are the best way to persist data in Docker. So you can see that this is the container and the volume for it, and you can see inside the file system we have the Docker area. For the bind mounts, may be stored anywhere on the host system, and the host system, which is your computer or the server. They may even be important system files or directory. Non-Docker processes on the Docker host or Docker container can modify them at any time. Okay, so this is the bind mounts. So you can see this is the container, the bind mount, and you can put it on the file system for your host. So it's okay on your host, on your computer, or on your server. Okay. Finally, the temp fs mounts are stored in the host system's memory only. So you can see that the temp file system, they are stored on the memory, and that actually it has a lot of use cases. We will see in them in a moment. Okay, so let's scroll down. Here are more details if you need to create volumes, to create bind mount, temp file system mount, and you can see we have a named pipes, and this is actually for Windows. So if you scroll up here, you can see that if you are running Docker on Windows, you can also use a named pipe. Okay, so this is used for Windows. So now let's start with the good use cases for volumes. Now actually, when it is time to select the volumes over the bind mount or the temp file system, when you sharing data among multiple running containers. So you have multiple containers and you have data shared with them, you need to use volumes. When the Docker host is not guaranteed to have given a directory or file structure. And when you want to store your containers data on a remote host or cloud provider rather than locally, so you don't need them locally, you need them on the cloud. Or when you need to backup, restore, or migrate data from one Docker host to another. So you have a Docker host and have this Docker host has a lot of containers, and you need all of that containers data to be on another Docker host, which means you need to migrate these containers to other hosts and have their data to be there. Okay, so this is the best solution for that. So in that case, volumes are the best. When your application requires high performance I/O on Docker desktop, so volumes are stored in Linux VM. So volumes are the best in that case. When your application requires fully native file system behavior on Docker desktop, for example, a database engine requires a precise control over disk, flushing to guarantee transaction durability. Now, when is the time good to use bind mounts over any of these two? Well, when it is sharing configuration files from the host machine to containers, and as you can see, Docker provides that by doing the NS resolution to container by default, and as you can see by mounting the etc resolve.conf from the host into each container, and sharing source code or build artifacts between development environment on the Docker host and container. And if you here you can see when the file or directory structure of the Docker host is guaranteed to be consistent with the bind mounts the containers require. Now when it is time good to use the temp file system, actually they are best used cases when you don't want the data to be persist either on the host machine or within the container. So actually this is used actually for security reasons or to protect the performance of the container when your application needs to write large volume of non-persistent state data. Okay,
Now here are some of the tips for using the bind mounts or volumes. I can see you can actually read them. Okay. Now this was just the theory part of that. Actually, we will have a real hands-on labs regarding the volumes, regarding building multiple containers, and each container talking with each others, and these containers take their files from the host machine using the volumes. All of that will be handled in details. Okay, thanks for watching.